what China has been able to achieve, right? It's an autocratic system. But China has been able to build a market-based system within an autocratic structure by allowing the regions to compete against each other. And the regions that succeed float to the top. When I'm looking at the US or other foreign markets, one of the analyses that I do is what I call the credit impulse, right? I look at the rate of change of credit stock to know whether an economy is going to go up or down. If you do that analysis in Nigeria, you will lose money.
I'm not trying to make this a power drinks and mics. Nigeria is not South Africa. Power functions it's the same. So you have wholesale, you have retail. Nigeria doesn't need 10,000 megawatts for you to get 24/7 power. So to solve this problem, in fact, the generation capacity we have can solve this problem if they can distribute better.
You make it sound so simple because I thought it was generation capacity that was the problem.
So I guess it's frustrated about the amount of money that we spent as a country on petrol subsidy. If only we spent it on electricity subsidy.
Hello everyone, welcome to Drinks and Mics, brought to you by Nairametrics. My name is Ugodre, and we do this every week, by the way. Go live Friday 6 p.m. On our channel, Nairametrics TV. Of course, if you're not following, you're not subscribing, you better start doing that now. Of course, I have the usual gang in the house, and for some reason, they can't think public holiday started today. Well, you're probably on a holiday right now as you're watching, but here it's not a holiday, but these guys, their weekend started pretty early. Right, look at Arnold to my left here. Never seen him this dressed down in a while.
I haven't seen myself this dressed down.
Yeah. But of course, Tunji, seems to have. By the way, what's all this love for him in the comment section?
I love you too.
He's not the only one on this set. There are better people here, so I don't know why there's just so much focus on him. Why? Don't you guys think he just says a lot of crap? Don't you guys think so?
Tunji's our pension guru.
We have our own in-house figure right here. Our main man, Sam.
Thank you.
Sam, we purposely left this drink unopened because I wanted to open it for you.
Thank you.
Tunji, could you do? You're the youngest here.
You know the problem,
Ugodre,
now that you are doing 21, you can't go lower.
You know,
so it's the next time it's red cast that you'll be sending for us. You need to up it. You know, we started. What did you start with?
So it's like the Nairametric Awards, right? So I'm at the table. We're all at the table, and they just brought one whiskey to the table, and I was like, I'm not drinking this. Like, nah,
you've been spoiled
about Vini 14, and Tunji.
You spoiled him.
I called the guys, and I was like, you know what? What's this? And then they brought something. They brought it to the table.
Anyway, thanks to Lee Drop for the drinks, in case someone there thinks that it's coming from my pocket. It's constantly Drop, by the way. And
it doesn't matter who buys it; it's who brings it to the table that is important.
We want to start first by cheering to our man here, Sam. Sam had a very good month, by the way. In case you guys, for those who are in his his investors in his portfolio. Remarkable month. I don't know whether to say what he did, though, but
I mean you can.
Sam's portfolio returned a massive 8% in the month of May.
8.7
by the way, and beats. I think the NGX did 5 plus 4.99%, almost 5%. And of course, year to date, you're up 55.
Since we launched it's a specialized equity fund. We launched first trade was September 2024, and since then the fund is up about 55%. The broader market, NGX 30 is up about 12%.
Oh, I have this new.
Well done. So I think it tells two stories. Okay, after yourself.
No, go on.
I think it tells two stories. I think first of all, it speaks to the talent That is Samson. But also, he also speaks to this. There's this conversation we were having last year, or maybe 2 years ago, where we talk about where you mentioned, broader EM markets post-crisis. So Thailand, India, Russia.
Yeah.
They had this in the late 90s where they had this huge crisis, Asian debt crisis. The Thai baht went off. Malaysia went off. Then it went over to Russia and went over to South America.
Yeah.
But then the years following the huge crisis, you always have this
excess return.
Yeah. So it speaks to that story as well, where Nigeria went to Nigeria, and now it has 12% 8 months, but you've done 55%. So 12% is great for Nigerian equities, but then 55% is also your skill.
No, I think that is basically the thinking behind the launching of the fund. Obviously, as you know, my background is EM, and I've experienced quite a lot of crises.
Yeah.
Crises can be very painful, of course. We've been through it. But it creates huge opportunities for investors that survive.
Of course.
And there's something about EM that I find fascinating is that return and losses clusters, right? So when you have a high return period, you usually have periods of high losses too.
Yeah.
And if you sort of know what you're doing and you're able to preempt some of these macroeconomic drivers, you can switch between high return period and avoid significant level of losses when the tide eventually turns. I think Nigeria is in a place of relatively high return, and I can see it persisting for a while. It reminds me of early 2000s, quite frankly. And you can see...
But let me ask you, So one of my risks, so I totally follow the theory, and I totally follow the thinking. One of my risks to that trade, and this is sometimes what holds me back from going more than I decide to go, is, I look at... when you look at the late 90s, not the late 90s, the early 2000s you mentioned, you had this huge Africa, everyone wanted Africa. Africa was the main thing, right? The whatever continent, Africa is the next big thing. But then you had a different global picture, right? You had lower US, zero to negative Western yields, with Japan, Europe, US. So it was an obvious carry trade, right? It was an obvious sell west buy EM. And now it's different because we're going into a high US yield environment.
So I wanted to ask a question. The carry trades are very obvious ex post. Right.
Yeah.
It's an obvious carry trade when you've done the trade, not before you do the trade. At the point where you do the trades, it's not as clear cut that it's such a great opportunity. I mean, if you are deploying capital into Nigeria, and in order to launch the fund, one of the things I went to do is that I read all the IMF Article 4 between 1999 and 2002. And when you do that, you realize how negative the expert opinion were around the pace and the structure of reform, right? And then if you had deployed capital in 2002, when the expert opinion was probably most negative, if I take out the dates, you'll probably think we're talking about 2024, right? And if you had deployed capital at that point, you'd have earned significant level of excess return. Where I do agree with you is that there were external drivers of the African rising story. Yeah. Obviously, China was rising, so commodity prices were relatively well paid.
Huge demand from that.
You could argue that the US yields came down, but they were not at the beginning of 2002. People were talking about twin deficit problems in the US as we are talking about today.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And at that point, yields were not low.
Okay.
What happened was that you had dollar weakness, right? And I think we are currently, the dollar is down 9%, 10% this year to date.
Yeah.
If you look quietly, there's stealth bull markets that is happening across EM. Like if you look at EM credit is up around 15% year to date. If you look at EM equities, Brazil, Chile, it's up around 20%.
So what am I missing then? What's causing that? Because if you're I see the weak dollar as what I'm seeing in the US now is I'm seeing a weak dollar but rising yield. So it feels like there's an exit from the US.
Yes,
right?
that is very reminiscent of the early 2000s. Because remember, this is what happened. We went through a period of UX exceptionalism in the 90s, very similar to what we've just been through.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? At that point, that was driven by internet. So I think US exceptionalism over the last 2 decades, in my opinion, has been driven by largely 2 factors. One is the discovery of shale. You have to put in context, US increased production of oil by 8 million barrels from 2008-2009 period. That is basically the equivalent of a Saudi Arabia in terms of oil supply. I often make the argument that economic growth and productivity gains is energy transformed. Show me a society that has cheap access to energy, and I'll show you a society that is industrializing or improving productivity.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So that provided a huge tailwind for the US. And then the second is the smartphone. The US basically dominated the ecosystem, maybe not the hardware, but the ecosystem around the smartphone resurgence. And smartphones has been a huge driver of productivity. And as a consequence, capital flowed into the US, right? I think I had mentioned here during the last meeting that the net international investment position of the US is 32 trillion. That's more than 100% of GDP. That's if you put in context, post-COVID, there was about roughly 9 trillion of capital that flowed into equity assets, right? And then in 2002, something happened. It looks like the US was going to go into a recession. Biden turned on the taps. Deficits went into overdrive. And while the market was pricing that deficit, because it's really hard to go into a recession when you're spending 7% of your GDP. What then happened was while people were feeling like, the smartphone trade was done, shale was peaking, we got a new dance, AI. Right? Yeah. And AI basically created a huge wave of expectations around productivity. Yeah. But that changed when China came in landed with DeepSeek, right?
And showed us that you can get that cheaper.
And there's a saying in international finance that when China enters a room, profit walks away.
I'm really waiting for Tunji's because I have a feeling Tunji has some sort of
I agree. So the part where I was tapping my legs on was the pessimism around analyst reports on especially the Nigerian economy. One thing I have said for maybe the greater part of 20 years is like usually when I listen to analysts, especially on TV, talking about the Nigerian economy, I always wonder if they live in Nigeria. There is one thing to speak the textbook, the inflation is rising year on year, the capital market is, but to actually feel the pulse of the Nigerian economy, you do feel that things are structurally feeling slightly better. I'm not saying they are great, but it's a lot better. It's not as bad as it used to be. But if you look at the analyst sentiments.
So I think the challenge that people have and I think the beauty of investing is people seem to think that in order for you to make money investing, the economy needs to be good.
Perfect. Not even good, perfect. It needs to be perfect.
But the reality is that I often tell my team that the second derivative is usually important than the derivative. What do I mean? The direction of change is more important than the absolute level of change itself. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, are we better today than we were yesterday? Because what happened yesterday is what feeds into the expectation of asset prices today. So to the extent that you can think that your future is better than your past, is the probability that the market hasn't priced in that future is very, very high. And that's where value is.
So just to conclude on this, Sam, interesting to also know if you would want to share what sort of equities, maybe some that
I'm happy. I'm happy to share.
So maybe your top 5 or your top 10.
I don't hide it. Exactly. Right? I don't hide it. It's not rocket science.
Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, I have some as well.
Are you opening my spider? Oh yeah, start.
No, so and I think it's very important to say this, right? Because there are two ways you can get our performance in Nigeria. Oftentimes, you go and buy liquid stocks that everybody wants to buy when market turns, and you can outperform, but the problem is you might not be able to get out. With Magna, we stayed on the very, very liquid end of the spectrum.
Okay.
Right? And the thesis really is around the fact that...
Which is very interesting though, because when you're on the liquid end of the spectrum, sometimes it's hard to see value, but go on.
Yeah, so, but this is where I really think people are missing the plot.
Okay.
When you go through a massive economic hardship, your industry bellwethers deepen their economic moat because smaller players die or are unable to compete.
Yeah, of course.
So, for example, like obviously there's been significant level of competition in FMCG, right, in the past from imports because import substitution, and even like I had friends who would do 1 or 2 lines of biscuits and distribute and make money, right? That guy have just seen his working capital go up 3 times.
Yeah.
Right, there's no bank that's going to give him liquidity, so that capacity dies.
And that's because of FX adjustment, isn't it?
FX adjustment. Yeah. So you now have the likes of the Unilevers and the Nestle's that deepen their economic moats. So I think that what we underestimate with incumbent strong players that are reasonably well governed is that this is the period where, number one, they are scared to spend. And as equity investors, we don't like companies that spend, right? So they are scared because then they just carry their free cash flow, put it into capex, and the risk around capex is high because you don't know if it's going to generate economic return. So they are very, very lean because we've gone through the winter. Right, they are afraid to deploy capital, and then you have a recovery trade. And what then happens is that you see significant growth in free cash flow, and which then largely gets distributed because they don't want to put it into capital expenditure, which is music as an equity as an equity investor. Yeah. So we've stayed relatively liquid. Obviously, we initially had large exposure to the financial sector, largely because the balance sheets were expanded post the FX retranslation, interest rates were high, and for the banks that we've chosen to expose to, asset quality was well managed because that was always the risk within the industry. And increasingly, since December, we added to our consumer exposure, but we've stayed in what I call the industry bellwethers, right? The Nestle's, the Unilever, because these are the guys that I think have deepened their economic moat and where you're going to see compounded return. And when you benchmark these companies relative to Frontier and EM peers, you start to understand the relative value that these businesses are. So we have been able to generate this return, staying relatively liquid, which means that the risk to the fund is quite low because I can, if I have a massive withdrawal, there's something we test internally, which is like, how much of the fund can I liquidate within a 10-day period? So just give me a sense of how much risk I'm carrying. And I can liquidate over 40% of my portfolio within 5 days.
Oh, that's quite liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah, for an equity, for an African equity frontier
fund.
market.
Obviously, as the fund grows, right, you have to tweak that a little bit.
But so how you deal with size now? Because one of the things
he hasn't finished listing.
Okay. No, because one of the things that in your favor is your size, right?
Whether in banking, in consumers, oil and gas. I have exposure to Seplat. I actually think that business will be one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world. Independent, right?
The way they're going.
Because the way they're going, they've acquired significant level of asset base. About 800 million of proven 2P reserves, right? And they are now sitting on very strong evacuation infrastructure.
Yeah, and they have sound
Focados, the QE terminal that they got from ExxonMobil, so they can evacuate. Historically, a big problem that they've always had with production is evacuation, because they kind of had one route to take out their product. So now they've built a lot of multiple redundancies. So production efficiency is going to increase. They have huge reserves that frankly hasn't been tapped. So I think that's a big story for us. Another team that we look at, we like the healthcare sector, so pharmaceuticals.
We're looking at me and Baker fits in
mainly, and Mercure. Those are interesting stories. They have balance sheet challenges for sure. But a lot of them have invested in capacity at a time when frankly competition has been reduced, imports are lower, and the product price inflation is very, very high. So they just need to ramp up that capacity. And it's one industry that enjoys significant level of state support. So I do think that there's huge opportunities. There's there. So it's concentrated.
Banking?
So within banking is usual suspect. I want to be able to sleep at night, right? And we've discussed in detail some of
is obviously on it. So with that before you even said anything.
So the way I always say that there are 2.5 banks in Nigeria. Right. GT, Zenith, and the half is Stanbic. I say half because half of Stanbic is not a bank. It's an asset gatherer. Right. The rest you can play around for beta, but if I want to sleep at night, Those are the three.
What do you think of the tier twos, the Fidelities, the Sterling?
I typically don't invest in them.
Okay. Wema.
So my analysts seem to think Wema is interesting, but I haven't been able to bring myself to add it.
There's this whole idea of Wema having this incredible fintech business that supports it. This Alert,
that
supports it.
The numbers are
contributing
really
significantly to their bottom line as well. Fidelity also, I think they're executing quite well.
Yeah.
Still, apart from the headwind they just had recently, but looks like an unfolding.
Problem I have with Fidelity is the pricing.
Tier 1.
It's the pricing. It's quite expensive.
Yeah, I got into Fidelity when it was like sub 10. So So now it's probably a little expensive. But still a very good stuff. Interesting stuff. Insurance?
I'm doing some work. I don't have any positions. It's an industry that I think structurally could be interesting. I just haven't found a way.
They've posted significantly higher returns as well.
Yeah, and I also think, when you think about financial service evolution, right? Obviously, the first part of your financial service pillar that gets built, it's your commercial banking aggregation, right? And then you build your asset gathering. And at that point, in Nigeria today, we probably have a functional pension industry.
Yeah.
Asset management and insurance are significant laggards, right? And I think that if you're thinking about development of insurance, right, if development of financial services for Nigeria going forward, I think you need to look at asset management and insurance, frankly. Yeah.
All right.
The question is, in order for me to express that view, I need to find an industry winner that is listed and well governed, and then I can use that to express the view. I haven't seen one yet.
I think that's where the challenge is.
Yeah.
Those criteria.
Don't you think the likes of maybe Cornerstone, NEM, Custodian, aren't they well governed? In your view?
I don't really know about the governance.
There's one that's related to access as well. I think.
Which one? I don't know.
The one that Ike is.
So I'm not
chairman.
sure. I don't want to speak to the. I don't want to speak to the governance. I don't want to speak to the governance. But an industry as a whole.
Yeah.
What I see as the driver for returns, has really been a growing sense of compliance with most businesses rather than a drive for greater innovation within the insurance space.
Interesting.
You are finding some fintechs pushing innovation, but the old players are really worried about innovating proper innovation to be able to bring greater growth. So they're sticking with the vanilla type insurance products. So the thing for me is that if you are sticking with the vanilla, the only reason why you're growing is that more people are complying to do the right thing as against you growing new spaces for business. So I still, unfortunately, the fintechs are not listed, so there's nothing we can do about it.
I often have a saying with insurance, it's a bit simplistic, but I'm like, in order for insurance companies to grow, people need to have assets that they want to insure, right? So insurance tend to be very correlated to economic growth.
Absolutely.
And if we have positive economic growth and people and economic mobility as well, right? So you go from the urban areas, you come from the rural areas, you come into the urban areas, you suddenly have a house, you currently have equipment, you currently have a phone. You need to insure them. And then insurance companies need to be innovative because insurance products are never bought, they are sold. Right? So I think insurance underwriters need to be innovative as to how to meet customers where they are purchasing things that are insurable.
Exactly.
To be able to distribute them. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've missed a trick with the agros? I know we've spoken in the past about Okomu, Presco. Those stock prices are done like 2 to 5
love
times
business.
over
So
1 year.
It's crazy. When I first moved to Nigeria, that was in 2018. I made a trip to Benin to see both Okomu and Presco.
Okay.
Okomu was at 36 naira. I think Presco was around there.
Yeah. That must have been way back though. That's like
2018. 2019, April 2019 was when I made the trip. I bought Okomu. At that time, Okomu was a much cleaner story than Presco. Presco was in the process of investing in its derivatives. He just bought an asset that I think had not matured, and there were question marks around the ability of the asset to add to the volume. So I bought Okomu at 36 naira. I think I sold it at like 100 and something naira, and I thought I'd made a lot of money. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I made. The only point I'll make with those businesses is that Okomu, Presco are basically dollar businesses, right?
Exactly. They're pure dollar.
And in an environment of stable exchange rates, which we can have a debate if that's where we are, you will then have to rely on growth in CPO prices in dollar terms and growth in volumes to justify multiples.
That has actually been their story over the years. I mean, Okomu is probably the one of the oldest stocks I've had in my portfolio. I had it for over a decade now. And it's incredible seeing it go from 30 naira.
It was much less than that. Because at the time when I saw it, naira looked expensive.
It faced a lot of cyclical issues. But what I did observe was from the days of the border closure, Okomu never looked back.
So you know what border closure did, right? Border closure expanded the local premiums.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you think about it, how this thing the revenue, if you want to model the revenue for Okomu, you basically model CPO prices in dollars translated into naira plus a premium. So that premium is largely driven by the ability of smugglers to bring CPO into the market. Because if those premiums are heavy, you buy in the international market, you bring in it, smuggle it in through the border, and then you sell. So you push those premiums down, right? But you can't push it lower than the dollar price of CPO, right? What happened with Godwin is that when he closed the market, that premium expanded. And at that point, CPO price started to rise, right? And also the outlook for CPO looks interesting now because a lot of producers are retaining a lot of that production, right? And kind of restricting the export of that product. So you really need to have a good outlook on what CPO is going to do. You need to have an outlook on what dollar naira is going to do. And then you need to have an outlook on what premiums are going to do. I just feel, and I might be wrong because my analysts have a different view, that the best of that trade is behind us.
I don't think so. So for me, I think the dollar components for me is what makes it a must-have for every portfolio. For me, it's
but can you still deliver? So I mean, if somebody wants to buy it now, can you still get the same kind of return that?
Yeah. So I mean, if your outlook is a weaker naira, so I'm not talking about a volatile naira, but a weaker naira. If your outlook is a weaker naira over 18 to 24 months, right? So like I stand and I look what it's going to look like over there.
Me and you,
so
sit on different fences.
So if your outlook is a
so
weaker naira,
recently I was listening to the MDs of both companies speak. And what I could get from both of them is there are structural challenges that are hindering them from proper expansion to be able to further take advantage of the market, because the consensus is that there is more space for them to sell into. So if they increase production, the market will take it.
And it doesn't make that point.
The market is in deficit.
You get
so
aside that,
then
even
export component to these guys that
exactly
is expanding.
95 or so percent of their revenue is local.
It's local, but it's
so they do have export potential that they are not tapping, particularly Okomu.
So the two things, of course, that I think they did speak about was the challenges of security around their production plants and things like that, their farms and the rest. And if we could, sort of fix that, it could help production. But also the second is to be able to find a significant, sizable chunk of local investment to be able to come in to help with that production. And there are a few players that are not averse to it, So it does look like there is some growth possibility.
Even though it's not clear yet. It's a very interesting industry. I mean, remember, this is an industry that Nigeria, on paper, given our topology and given our geography, should dominate. So being 2% of the global CPO market,
in fact, the way they put it was, they are pissed with their production numbers. I saw it.
We gotta move on.
I agree with you. There are challenges around expansion, which is why someone like Presco went to go and buy an asset in Ghana. Right. So like, it's not that. I remember speaking to Graham Helfer, who was the then CEO. I don't know if he's still there, of Okomu. And for me, I found it very interesting. The guy was basically explaining to me that, you know what, I like this capacity as it is, right? if there's his argument is that if there is significant level of unrest in Nigeria, they've built this ecosystem
that's enough.
that is enough. And if they expand it, they reduce their degrees of control.
Okay.
The place looked bulletproof, but recently they had some issues with the community. But at that point, it looked bulletproof.
Yeah.
And that boring approach, in my mind, for me as an investor, I found it very interesting, which was why I picked Okomu at the time relative to Presco. But Presco has executed quite well. Yeah. Its derivatives business investment has come through. And then the land that they acquired that people thought they overpaid for, the yields on those are starting to
Interesting too that livestock feed also appears to be doing pretty well. But we got to move on, guys. By the way, I don't want to move on without mentioning this. Coronation, this is back to insurance, up 200% in 1 year. AXA Mansard, 80%. Custodian also up. I think Custodian is also up about 154% in 1 year. So pretty interesting things happening in insurance. Probably have time to.
Did we mention we had winners?
Winners. Oh, we're going to talk about that. Are you segueing already?
No, yeah. So I wanted to say we have winners. First of all, I noticed that Arnold was bribing people in the comment section.
Yeah, so all the top 5 guys.
So all your books,
you get your books.
It's checked in comment section. We have winners all listed for the 50K prices.
Yeah.
And books for Arnold. So we're gonna just see, then try and contact us so that we can get your
because Otunba's money
I'm
still
supposed to give
me,
out 10 books as well, right?
Yeah.
For Vantage, right?
Yeah, Vantage.
Yeah, that's a great book. I read it in one take.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Good one.
So 100K from Otunba, then 50K from me, right?
Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. We'll move on, guys, to the next
100K from me.
next the next segment. It's 2 years of the Tinubu administration. There's been a lot of talk around it online. I even did my own personal opinion on my morning brief. Yeah. But guys, I mean, so it's almost like
good work, right? And this has, to be honest, it could have the president really could be Humpty Dumpty, and I really don't care. But the point is, if you see structural changes that are going in the right direction, and when you see people, using CBN to plant tomatoes,
Yeah,
you
3
see,
bites.
You see, that's my point. That's my point. I said that at the
You wanted to
beginning,
you have more buys.
I have. So the tax reform is
was that a buy for you?
Is a buy.
Removal of fuel subsidy.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's another buy.
Yeah, you're talking about reforms now. So that's
So
not a buy.
what about you? You haven't given us your
waiting for you guys. Do you guys have any disagreement? Are you on board with this buy sell?
Reforms, monetary policy buy, same thing with me. You are hold on fiscal.
Yeah, hold on, fiscal.
Yeah, which you thought probably should have been a sell.
Yeah.
Right?
And I explained why I was bold, right?
Yeah.
Because
Because I'm a sell on fiscal.
That would have been a sell.
I was a sell, but I get that
makes
explanation.
sense.
You were. So you were. So you're not going to sell. So you convert it.
I have experience.
I'll put things in context. If you go on the Ministry of Finance website, you can't find any fiscal data.
Yeah.
Up to the point, the finance minister gave a presentation in New York with a revenue number that is markedly different from what the statistical bulletin from the CBN came out.
Correct.
And the scale of difference is so significant. And we are still waiting for the budget office to give us data on 2027 and the second half of 2024 numbers.
Yeah, we still don't have that.
It's a mess.
It's a huge one. And I think they kind of acknowledge that as well.
Yeah.
Sources within the ministry tell me that it's a huge problem that they're trying to solve. In fact, there's a team that has been set up to try and address the problem, harmonize all the data differentials they have within several ministries or several departments. On that
See, I am a local investor.
It's
I have
embarrassing.
time in my hand, right, to go and research these things. I'm struggling to find data.
Yeah.
If you have an analyst in the middle of Utah that says, Nigeria is interesting because I had to a conference call that the Minister of Finance went to, and you go to MBS, you can't get data. You go to Ministry of Finance, you can't get data. And then this little data you get from the presentation that the man gave you, when the CBN released their own bulletin, you find out that data is wrong. I mean, you can't, it is crazy.
That's why you should visit Nairalytics. We do have a lot of All right, so my own sell. I'm trying not to repeat what you guys have said, but I think the number one sell for me will be rule of law.
Rule of law.
Yeah, I think that is probably among his, because I was checking his 8-point agenda. That's one of the major things. And I think in terms of judiciary, not really sure that they have been of immense help to the government or to Nigeria in general. I think there's been a lot of suspect around rule of law and the role they play in driving investment and protecting property, wealth, and of course, delivering judgment on time. So I think that is one area that maybe perhaps in the second half of his first term or the first 4 years, he probably needs to double down on that. I think rule of law is one area that you do need to get pretty right. And I can also add regulation to that as well. So we've seen a little bit of improvement in regulations here and there, but if you speak to investors, manufacturers, small businesses, they still complain a lot about regulatory bottlenecks, despite some.
So you think regulation needs to be more lax?
Yes, across. There's still a lot of multiple taxation here and there.
That's what Taiwan and his team are
still
fixing.
difficult exporting out of Nigeria. You still have a lot of issues with port congestion. Nigeria still has a lot of checkpoints across the country, inhibiting movement of goods and services and even people. So, in fact, I can't recall the last time I saw the amount of checkpoints we see now. I don't know if you guys noticed that. There's just checkpoints everywhere.
Police checkpoints.
Yeah, police checkpoints, especially police checkpoints, immigration checkpoints across.
I'm sorry, but I kind of get slightly offended when they stop me. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of entitlement. I get a bit offended.
So
and they stop a lot of young people though.
Yeah, but
it's
see,
incredible. Like once they see you on maybe dreadlocks or you're in a stud, you're bound to be stopped.
Like so, I'm not sure about that. I mean, in terms of movement of goods, I understand. But as an individual, I like it because I feel safe.
Yeah, that's one way you can do it.
I don't know when they wind down and then God give me 200 naira. That's what I'm down. It's very frustrating, right? And then there's also like you can have all these ideas, and this government does have ideas.
Yeah.
But people need to implement those ideas. If you don't have, like, for example, like a friend of mine was imported a car recently, and the process of dealing with custom, it's a nightmare. Like even if you are willing, you want to pay the full duty in accordance to the law, right? The process is frustrating.
Yeah.
Right. I'd rather speak to agents than actually speak to you as an individual.
And even in government agencies where they've actually digitize things.
Yeah.
I have applied for a new driver's license for over a year now. Over a year, yes. All I have is just that piece of paper. And each time I ask, it's Abuja, there's one problem. I don't know if anybody else has that experience.
Yeah, I've had the same issue with the NIN.
Abuja. So you have so you just realize that these are areas where
it's supposed to be.
They claim they've done, they've done a lot of reforms, they've digitized it.
But now people go run that system. And this is the challenge because you now have, I don't know how you fix a problem like this. It's a very difficult problem to fix.
It's tough.
I don't know whether it's tough or whether it's just
because it is the entire.
What's so difficult in NIN, in driver's license? Like, why can't? And it's not like it's a new one. It's a renewal.
Rent is rent. At the end of the day, Ugo, if you are willing to pay the right people, your license will come out.
But it shouldn't be the case, though.
No, but this is the point.
It's frustrating.
But there's an ecosystem on top of ecosystem of rentopreneurs, which is what I call them. Right? Whose job is just to frustrate the process.
And one of the issues I find is that we've accepted it. It's like, allow him, pay him, allow him. And for me, it's frustrating that we've accepted it.
It's cultural. If I want paper to move, anytime I interact with government bureaucracy, I can't go direct.
Yeah, you can't.
It's very challenging. Even if you want to.
Even with the CAC that is digitized,
it's turned to the point where you have to have a guy for everything.
So this is the problem.
You have to have
if you don't have a guy,
if you don't have a guy, and all the things you've said, there are guys who can get it in 24 hours.
This is what
Who is the guy that can get my license out in 24 hours?
This is the guy. We also have our issues about NIN and BV not matching.
There was a document I was trying to get And I was talking to this bank, and the document was stressing both of us in trying to complete the transaction. And then the banker says, I'll give you a number of one guy. He'll get it tomorrow. I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah.
And then the guy, I messaged the guy contacts me. And it's like, not like this.
Actually,
then he gives me the fee. Then I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know
You
what?
need to get it done.
I need to get this done. So I send him money. Bro, he gets it to me the next afternoon. Now I'm confused because I think this has to be a fake document. Because how did you get it out this quickly? Like, and I'm checking and it's legitimate. 24
It's
hours.
expanded to even get visa appointments.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, somebody
that
told me that they
He's the guy.
I don't know how that happens.
So there's this visa office.
So they give you a date and you have to fast track it for...
No,
this visa
so
office.
to get a date is difficult in some cases for somebody.
The
But
guy.
if you know somebody who knows somebody, you're gonna get it.
No, so to get a date,
You can even get it.
agent was telling me that
They can bring it forward.
To get the date. Like the date, the closest date is like a month away. Then if
Or
you want
6
to get
months away, you want to get it closer.
you get this amount. Then you've now submitted, right? If you want to get the report out quickly,
That's another amount. So think about it. Think about the level.
So it's crazy
of,
entrepreneurs. I like that.
So
word.
think about the level of ingenuity that goes into building this rent economy. Just imagine it's channeled to productive enterprise.
It's just.
But it's ingenuity. I mean, listen, when there's petrol scarcity, right? How hard is it for a guy to say, if I just stand outside the petrol station,
Guys,
Is that
You know why? You know why
Is he a
Aaron
genius?
You know why Aaron is having it? No, you know why Aaron is having it?
Guys, some of them run ecosystem of people that they sort out, they manage, right? They have it's not easy for you to just wake up, call somebody, and the person will not call another person, and the next minute,
not easy.
It's a relationship management.
I have a friend who
Enterprise.
who knows somebody.
I call it the rent economy.
It's a rent economy.
I have a friend who knows somebody in Abuja who was told that if you want any problem fixed, whether it's police, whether it's judiciary, whether it's government regulations, that's actually his job to get it fixed.
That's more than a
Yeah.
lobbyist, man. That's
If there
that's
no
something else.
kidding.
That's not a lobbyist anymore.
Any except maybe criminal
That's Mr.
issues. Yeah,
Fixer.
but almost like what's that movie again?
That lady.
And that guy,
What's that lady's name? I forgot
that Mr. Fix-It,
fixes everything.
and that Mr. Fix-It will ball and will be more wealthy than the guy who is employing 10,000 people trying to produce something.
Yeah.
I think if you want to go down to the heart of what is messed up about this country, that's the topic you need to address.
Yeah.
So that's my own. That's my cell.
cell.
Yeah, that's my cell.
But
so we don't want
that
Olivia
cell cannot
Popes.
be. That cell cannot
Olivia
be.
Pope.
We don't want Olivia
thank
Popes.
you.
No, so that
Yeah,
cell.
Olivia
That
Popes.
cell.
We just want to
thank
just.
goodness.
That
Bugging
cell.
me, man.
My problem is that cell cannot be placed on this government squarely.
I mean, like
that's
Judicial rule of law.
I mean, like,
So
apart from that, it's in the 8-point agenda.
Okay.
Rule of law is in the 8-point agenda. So that's why.
They will get to it, but it's a very, and to be honest, it was. I remember then when President Goodluck Jonathan was in office, this was some of the things me and a few people were saying at the time. Focus, again, I was naive at the time, focus on your first 4 years on rule of law. Just making it.
Rule of law doesn't win elections.
Exactly. My brother, it doesn't cost you. Which is why I said I was naive at the time. But the idea was make it seamless to do business in Nigeria, make the laws effective so that when foreign businesses are coming in, they know they are protected as they come in through the doors. All those things are multiplier effects for productivity, for investment, all those things. But he didn't do it, and even if he did it, maybe that would have even made it easier for him to lose the elections, which he eventually did. But yeah.
All right. So my hold. I have a number of holds that I wrote down here, and I mean this.
He wrote it down.
If I used Tunji's, I just wrote it down now.
Put us on the spot.
If I use Tunji's, creation, which by the way is not the drinks and mics.
Sellish cell.
Holdish cell. Because they are borderline, really.
Okay.
Yeah, but closer to sell than buy. One would be his politics. I get that maybe he needs that politics to get a lot of his economic reforms going forward. So, but I worry when I see a politics of no opposition, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I kind of think like for an economy to
states.
thrive in the 21st century, you do need to have a level of opposition and different views, like shadow government.
Yeah, but we don't really have a shadow government system, do we? We never really
Well,
have
shadow
one.
government is only in the UK, but I'm talking about opposition. Exactly.
I do agree with
I do disagree with the need for opposition.
Yeah. So
I agree with the need for idea competition.
No, so I understand that opposition sometimes can stifle reforms, especially when they are tough, and you need to push them down the throat of
But it makes
a lot
you
of people.
think.
Yeah,
It makes you think. Though.
but I can't. But I don't think. I think that capitalism, right, and democracy does need to have
Checks and
credible
balances.
opposition.
Yeah.
So let's talk.
And not just for now, but for the future. You want to always have.
Maybe I'm thinking more short
people-
term.
because you
Can
can't
I ask
always
a very
people
simple
always
question?
need a choice. Yeah,
They win one country,
yeah,
right, globally,
Yeah.
that has industrialized under a democratic environment.
Boom. Mic drop.
That have industrialized under a democratic
So
environment.
Mic drop.
There are so many.
Which
of
one?
them,
Which one?
across Europe?
Not today.
Which
when they
one?
were industrialized.
Which one?
when they were industrialized.
Which one?
Yeah.
India is a case in point. India is a case in
But
point.
India is not yet destroyed, but in your mind is Modi democratic.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even though he's been in power for long, but he's always been elected.
winning elections.
He's always
not
been
democracy.
elected. I think so. South Africa.
Because Ashiwaju will win elections. Doesn't make him them.
Exactly. So look, I don't have a problem. You can win. I don't even mind having.
I'm not saying I want a dictator.
You can have 4 terms. You can have 5 terms. I really don't care.
Yeah.
Right? You can have, because if you have 5 terms and you keep winning under a democracy, then it just shows that people love your policies. People love.
But I can see where it
so-
comes from, because sometimes I feel like
but-
industrialization and democracy,
I always.
because of the change every 4 years. One guy builds something, the other guy destroys it.
I kind of
It's
think.
strong.
So that's a different thing. You can say, look, maybe a 4-year tenure is too short for you to have the sort of economic development that you want as a young country. You can say you want 6 years, a term. You can say you want 1 full year term, 10-year term. I really don't care. My point is, I just think that for the sort of country we have that is multicultural,
I see your
very
point.
important that you
I
put
see
that
your
out
point.
there,
Yeah.
right? That is multicultural. You do need to have credible opposition.
So what
it also speaks to your point as well.
No.
About, you know,
I
you
love
have
the lopsidedness of the appointment.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Can I just say something, right?
Yeah.
Because there are 2 separate arguments here.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we're a market, the Drinks and Mike is an economic program. I always speak from purely an economic lens.
That's all we're speaking from.
right? And not
Yeah.
from a societal lens.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to be in a democratic environment.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to be where there's rule of law.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why I would probably rather live in the UK than maybe today I'll live in China. But in the past, I used to say I would rather live in the UK than live in China. Maybe that has changed, right? But what I wanted to establish is what we need in a market economy, right, is a way that the best ideas flow to the top. And that doesn't have to be reflected in a political system that changes, right? What China has been able to achieve, right, is an autocratic system. But China has been able to build a market-based system within an autocratic structure by allowing the regions to compete against each other. And the regions that succeed flow to the top. I'll give you an example. When EV came to the market, when Xi Jinping had this view that China needs to dominate in certain industry and emerge EV as one of them, I think at the time they gave over 500 EV licenses, right? The provinces, every province probably has an EV automaker. And then it's a large market. They competed. They killed each other. As at 2022, there was 130 EV. We now know that BYD is at the top. And then they now opened up the market. Or you're at BYD, you're now the Voltron of EV. You can go and compete and conquer the rest of the guys. Yeah. So what you've built there is a competition of ideas within an autocratic construct.
Battle-ready company.
Economically, that and when you even think about things like even the US, right? Even the UK, when you think about the period where they went through this rapid industrialization process, they were not entirely democratic. We start to talk about democratic ideals
stop,
when we've industrialized.
They
right?
were not. They were not.
They were. America was democratic from day one. America's industrialization started towards the end of the 19th century.
So how do you call it democracy?
In England, they were democratic.
How democratic is a system where only farm owners, landowners were allowed to vote?
Yeah.
And landowners were
at least black people couldn't vote.
That was not democratic. What is no?
But you were voting. That's what I'm talking about. You were voting, and you had opposition, and you had two parties.
No,
you were voting.
I will not agree.
Whether you
this is the problem.
Vote,
this is the problem. This is the problem I have with.
So by the way, it doesn't matter.
Clarity of
at least you were voting.
For clarity of thought, I am not arguing against democracy.
Yes.
I am arguing about the efficacy of democracy within an industrialization.
I hear this Lee Kuan Yew model a lot.
That's why I'm not really backing it, because I sort of agree with you on this.
The thing is that I've been on that side of the argument before. Yeah. And I also worry about this Lee Kuan Yew model, and I also don't like...
Because you institutionalize... Imagine you institutionalize Buhari.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if he didn't have to leave. Right? No. So I always... Like to me, let's not... So Nigeria is not China. Nigeria is not India. Nigeria is not UK. Nigeria is Nigeria.
It's a fair argument.
Yeah, and let's also remember that... Let's also remember that this is not about the top alone. It's not about the presidency.
Absolutely.
I'm talking all the way down. Yeah, because if you whatever it is you want at the top, you can also have it at the bottom as well. So that's my own. That's my own.
So here's my.
I think Nigeria needs to unleash regional competition.
No. Exactly. But the thing is this: what I need to explain is that the democracy in the US that provided
the platform for
industrialization.
Looks very different
from
what it is today.
Because democracy is not perfect.
So one. The second thing is the democracy that has been handed to Nigeria to practice. The question is it the best form of democracy for development in Nigeria? Because if you look at Nigeria and what Nigeria is, that democracy is probably hindering that form of democracy. Yeah. Because what America's democracy is, if you take democracy today and take it to the US, when the US started industrializing, when the Rockefellers and the rest were building and all of that, that US would have not developed.
So Tunji,
that's a fair argument.
I buy your comments and your line of thoughts.
I love democracy, by the way.
What I don't... We all do.
We're having a very narrow argument.
Exactly.
What I just want to say is
that... I support communists.
There are some communists in the house. Autocrats. We're not autocrats or drinks and mics.
I always say this. Please go and watch this documentary series, The Men Who Built America. It's very instructive. It's very instructive to development of any nation.
I was just going to mention that too, in the context of, at the end of the day, right? It really isn't about your style of governance. Okay, not anything can work for you. You can be autocratic, you can be democratic, you can be military. It's always about the vision of the person that's at the top. And how well that person can execute, right? Because give China somebody else, a different leader, they probably won't be where they are today. Give Singapore a different leader with all that power, they probably won't be where they are today. But let's move on. There's no time. There's no time.
What's your bias? Please. I want to quickly say. I want to quickly say this, that it's also often underestimated what Xi Jinping did in China. He inherited a failing China from his predecessor?
He didn't.
No.
He didn't.
So he didn't. It was a growing China.
He didn't.
It was a growing China.
He didn't. I actually think what Xi Jinping is doing might, in the long run, harm China. This competition for ideas that exists within the Politburo, Xi Jinping is quietly silencing it. In the long run, that could be a problem. Because Xi Jinping is a fantastic leader, visionary. But what happens after Xi Jinping and somebody takes those levers of power that he has concentrated?
You have a moron take over from him, right?
All right, guys. All right.
But in the past, the Politburo was ruthlessly competitive. And this is the problem. So, like, when I listen to Western commentators talk about China, they miss the point. I explain to people that China is more capitalist than the US, and they think I'm nuts, right? When you talk about Adam Smith's perfect competition type of environment, it's more in China than you find in the US.
Their brand of capitalism is ruthless.
It's a market-based economy, crazily ruthless, that works within an autocratic construct, right? Meanwhile, what you have in the US is basically capital buying political power. And almost monopolistic, oligopolistic, capitalist behavior.
So the more money you have, the better it is.
Okay.
All right, guys. So I mean, you can see how you can see how
believe what we just did.
All right. So my next hold, this won't be as controversial as the other one. My next hold is I had thought that by now, well, maybe very soon we would hear. Maybe very soon, but I thought that by now we would see some kind of scorecard of some ministers. I think there are some that have underperformed.
KPI.
That probably need to go. Probably need fresh hands, or maybe something around. Look, there are certain ministries that need to do better. So I think that would be where I'm also. Kind of holdish. I had expected the most, but it's a hold because maybe there's still time for that. Okay. Let's wait for June 12 and see what happens. But in terms of my buy, I think for me, my buy, to be specific, as much as we would like to talk about some of the reforms, but my buys are around certain laws, even though I said, rule of law was a problem, but there's certain acts that we have seen that I think is very critical to the sort of economy or the sort of economic growth that we're all looking for. A lot lies on, of course, on how some of these things are executed or implemented. So the Student Loan Act, I think, is fantastic. There's the minimum wage one as well. I don't know if that happened under here. Yeah, the minimum wage. Yeah. I think there is the one that the tax reform bill that is currently being worked on. I think that is solid. There are also a lot of interesting ideas, which I guess we'll talk to at some point. I like what I'm seeing around consumer credit. There is a whole lot of underground build up happening that a lot of people may not, be aware of, which also speaks to Tunji's point around maybe they're not making credit a lot of noise.
Credit guarantee.
The Electricity Act is perhaps one of the most forward-thinking acts that you would find anywhere in Africa. As much as we have major problems here, if you speak to, I haven't seen any foreign investor that I've spoken to that haven't said anything good, but that have said anything bad about that act. And that is the electricity. The Electricity Act as well. That is another solid one. So I kind of feel...
Wait, I've not read the act. Could you tell me if the act has anything to do with the whole law around, if you produce domestically, like IPPs and the threshold to put it into national grid? Does it have anything to do with that?
It's all embedded in the act, but I guess
has the act been passed? Sorry, I'm behind.
Yes.
I'm behind.
Yeah, because for me, I'm even wondering. I think for the regular person,
like independent generation capacity from 1 megawatt.
So the key tenets of that act is now giving states the power to also regulate.
But Buhari passed that
electricity. Wasn't it on
Buhari passed that act, and he
was signed on the.
I think electricity was passed by Buhari. February 2023. I think.
No. No, we can quickly check that out.
I think Buhari passed that act.
I found something interesting
did.
about parts of Europe and electricity, especially the fact that there are some parts of the year where electricity has oversupply, where and there's some times where it has undersupply, where the regions then buy electricity from
homeowners. 9th of June 2023. Homeowners.
It was passed under Buhari and then signed by Ashiwaji.
So for me, electricity for us will always be something I think is disappointing. So when I haven't read the act, so forgive my ignorance, lack of knowledge. But for me, it's just like, okay, I always tell this story. I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Port Harcourt. I left when I was 12 or 13 years old. Issues with electricity.
wait, NEPA. You left Nigeria because of electricity?
No, I'm just saying.
NEPA.
I came back in 2023. NEPA. So for me, it's I don't even see. I need to see something, and I'm speaking very plainly and very simply.
And I'm like. So I think when my son first came to Nigeria, we were in the house, and then the lights went off, and he said, "Daddy, I'm blind."
Listen, I was watching. There's this thing on Instagram. There's this thing on Instagram, right? Where this girl was streaming. There's this thing on Instagram. This girl was streaming for 3 years. For 3 years live, right?
The picking I've never seen.
There's this thing on Instagram where this girl was streaming for 3 years live. I don't know the streamer's name. He saw her and he was like, "Wow, you've been streaming live for 3 years." And my first thought was like, "Wow, NEPA didn't take live for 3 years." It's like we're so traumatized. And now if there's electricity for 10 hours, I'm always like, "Oh, NEPA, you've tried." And as I was so used to just what we really need is a decentralization of that power system where there can be local producers.
That is exactly
local producers
what you have in that act.
Local producers to the point where, for instance, if I live in an estate, we can invest in power production to the point where we can now start selling to our neighbors if for some reason
the challenge I have with that, electricity is one industry that scale economics works brilliantly in. Right. So the amount of deadweight loss you will have by having very decentralized electricity systems is going to create inefficiency in the economy.
So
obviously having inefficient power is better than having no power.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about it in terms of scale. Right. Yeah. Electricity, the scale economics in electricity is impressive.
The amount of money is going to require. Because again, how
much money have we already pumped into this? I don't know, man.
So here's the thing.
The problem is not
work, right?
I think all the acts Lagos will have electricity.
So let me
fix
this is one area this is one sector that I have a little bit of competence in. And one of these days I think we're going to invite somebody in that sector to come and help break things down for us on Drinks and Mics. But to Tunji's point, and it might not be a very popular opinion, the way the electricity sector is constructed today, you probably need not of $20 billion to try and create the sort of scale that you're looking for that will deliver
24 hours.
No, not even. I always tell people there's 24 hour. There's 24 power supply. Go and buy a generator. You get it for 24. The problem is
the unit cost.
Yes,
that makes sense.
The problem is the cost. There's 24 hour power. I have 24 hour power in my house, but I know how much I pay to get it. Yeah. So it's the cost that's the problem. So
I agree with you.
Now, but here's the kicker. Even if you bring in $20 billion, it's still not going to solve the problem, because let's think about it. You decide to invest $10 billion in transmission. Okay, so what about generation? Do they have that same level of investment capacity? Can they attract that level? Because everybody has to be investing around the same time. Apart from that, you need to be sure that the sort of equipment that they are getting fits very well.
So I have something that's been going on for 40 years. I think you need what I call parallel synchronicity. Nigeria has so far in its post-independence life have not demonstrated the capacity to parallelly synchronize.
Even water. That's what I call the borehole mentality. So the borehole mentality is that because we can't have a centralized water system in this country, which is his point. You can't have it. What happens? Wow. Everybody builds a borehole.
Let me even tell you something.
Because the cost of having that now, it's gonna be more expensive.
But then what's the solution?
Let me need to answer pointing. The water has passed already. So it's gotta be. Sorry, Tunji. It's all. That's why I told you that you have to look at that act, and it's whether you're gonna have investors come in and execute. What is likely going to work? What is likely going to work? And what we're seeing,
it's about that.
It's not. They can't even solve. What's going to happen is you would see pockets of decentralization start to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
And what I think might lead to your point of having cheaper electricity is competition. If there are pockets of decentralization happening, and there's a lot, and then innovation becomes better, technology becomes better, right? Over time, then you can then start to have cheaper power.
Let me tell you.
Remember, to enter one chance. Name me one industry in Nigeria where competition has led to lower prices.
No. Okay. Let me say this. Let me say this. Telecoms. Yeah. Let me say this about
that's fair.
Let me say this about my estate.
Fintech. Okay.
So my estate works with a blend of electricity.
But remember, telecoms gave you national scale.
That's what I'm saying.
It's the same thing now.
It was almost it was decentralized at the start.
Immediately.
They had to create something. If they had rode on the Nitel infrastructure that they had, don't be where they are now.
Exactly.
Remember at the start,
everybody had to build their own
mast.
But remember, Lagos didn't have a telecom license. Ogun State didn't have a telecom license.
Yes.
But they had to roll out so dependently.
Electricity is different because, apologies, you're going to make a point.
I don't know the answer to this question. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Electricity is different because now what can happen is that Lagos State as a state can say, okay, you know what? There are transmission issues that is affecting power supply in Lagos State, and we want to industrialize Lagos State. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to get a private power company, power generator, come to Alimosho, build a power plant. We're going to give you a license. We're speaking to Ikeja Electric. Ikeja Electric, let them use your distribution lines. They're going to give you distribution use of service. It's called DUS. But you're also mandated to meter all those customers so that the cash flow is very well measured, right? Yeah. Then you've basically effectively cut off transmission, right? Transmission capacity. And then the generator sits somewhere in Alimosho and is selling to everybody. Now, it's likely going to be expensive, which is likely to be the first problem. Then Lagos State government can say on its own, you know what? Alimosho gives us the most votes. So we will subsidize power in Alimosho for X number of period, or probably subsidize power to manufacturing or whatever. And then people in Alimosho start to get 24/7 hours. And then you come to Sulere and say, okay, Sulere, same thing. We get someone, we give you a license, you drop a generator plant here, and blah, 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 and then 2-4 power. Eco-Atlantic. I think that's the path
and that's
what you're likely going to see across.
That is the path we are on. Yeah. That is what is likely going to happen. I've always been of the view that within the next 5 to 10 years, Lagos will solve the power problem because of the capacity that Lagos have to solve this problem.
No, but Lagos
have that conversation about generating capacity to a private investor in Bornu and see what they will say to you.
Is that putting it into the national grid issue that always caps most of those IPPs? So, for instance, my estate uses a blended system with IPP generator and I was about to say NEPA,
Eco Disco.
Eco Disco. So between that, we have some level of, but the IPP, which has now packed up for whatever reason, used to, I used to always think my estate was big. But in the grand scheme of things, my estate really means nothing to this IPP. They were, in fact, the only reason why we were able to connect them is because we are beside a very big estate, right? So they just connected us and, we just got light. Now, the context for me with those kind of situations is like estates like mine on that IPP's grid are inconsequential. it means that the IPP has enough capacity to be able to carry a lot of people, right? I think they now, in trying to gather more revenue, they started to expand to the point where they overburdened the system, and the system shut down, and they've not been able to sort it out. My thing is, I could clearly see the trajectory with those kind of IPPs. Now, what my estate would benefit from in that situation is if there were 3 IPPs in that same in space, right? When I mean 3 IPPs, in the sense that if your IPP goes off, we just switch off to yours. If yours goes off, we switch off to his, right? In that context, you can't overbill me.
Power just doesn't work like that.
No, I know it doesn't work like that, but what we need to create is give the liberalization.
In the UK, it does.
My point is, in Germany,
here's
it does.
what works. No. What happens in the UK that you don't know is there is a single generator, and then you can have different retail distributors. Yeah, that's what happens. So you have
Ugo Dre's.
any retail.
I need to say this. Ugo Dre's concept of power is that the generators should be here and still pass it through the central distribution.
No, that's not what he's advocating.
No,
that's not what I was the one that's saying that is the most efficient. I'm not saying that.
Remember
would work
that
in Nigeria.
That's why you need to understand how that power functions, and it's the same. So you have wholesale, you have retail.
Retail, yeah.
The wholesale is the transmission, which is the grid.
Yeah.
But you still have the retail, which is the one that comes to your distribution
Yeah.
here. So to build new distribution capacity is expensive. So there's no point building a new distribution capacity where one exists already. The reason why that one is not working is because generation is not coming.
No, but we have more. But we have more generation capacity than we have distribution. The transmission lines just cannot distribute it.
Yes, you do have. You do, exactly. That's the point. So you have more generation capacity. You have very limited
Distribution capacity.
transmission capacity. But you also have limited distribution capacity as well, by the way. But you have enough distribution capacity that can deliver 24/7 power in most parts of Nigeria.
By the way, I need to say this. So I need to say this.
Yes, let me give you one start. I'm not trying to make this a power drinks and mics, but one thing a lot of people don't realize,
it is.
What a lot of people don't realize is that, you see, Nigeria is not South Africa.
Okay.
So Nigeria,
in what sense?
Good. So Nigeria,
because I'm like, okay.
Nigeria doesn't need 10,000 megawatts for you to get 24/7
consumption.
power. Yeah, because South Africa
low.
has a lot of coal mines. So South Africa
needs
needs 25, 30,000. So to solve this problem, in fact, the generation capacity we have can solve this problem if they can distribute better.
Make it sound so simple, because I thought it was generation capacity that was the problem.
So I guess I'm frustrated about the amount of money that we spent as a country on petrol subsidy. If only we spent it on electricity subsidy. Because firstly, electricity, you can't store it.
Had electricity subsidy for decades.
The point is, no, it's an inefficient subsidy. So, Ugo,
you can say that.
I'm always very nervous around, and I'm a capitalist and I'm a market person. But one of the things I'm afraid of is we need to build competitive industries. And one of the ways you can build competitive industries, you need to have cheap power.
I agree.
Right. So how do we, and this pathway that we are following, market reflective, decentralized. In my head, I'm just seeing cost. So are we then going to have electricity that is expensive that makes your industrialization journey harder?
You know what's funny? Despite the sort of band A tariff we have, we still have one of the cheapest electricity prices globally. Shocking, right?
Yeah, but this
we gotta go on, guys. We gotta go.
No, it's fine. Let's move to the next one. This is one of your buys.
So my buy is
for me, it's a shocking buy.
My buy,
it's a good buy. It's a good
so
buy.
My buy is not. My buy is that the laws
or the act
that's
been written out,
that has been signed, that I think
but not
should
not
usher in economic prosperity if they are implemented.
He's trying to look good.
Yeah, so
he didn't
you gotta
allow us
have that.
research. He went to go and research.
No, I didn't research. I didn't research. I didn't research that.
I need to look into it more.
I don't know.
I always argue.
I didn't mention.
Like,
But
I think
I didn't talk about the SEC Act, for example. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's
There are a number of them. Yeah.
So the SEC have been,
there are foundational
this
changes that this administration is laying.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Whether
my point.
it leads to economic growth and
Yeah, whether it becomes a
productivity.
game changer is a different thing.
Right,
Yeah.
it's and the execution of those things.
Exactly.
It's but like I think there's a lot of thoughtfulness in passing laws, right, for this government, which I would argue that we haven't had in a while. And I think Asiwaju, being the quote unquote godfather that he is able to get this thing through Congress without the normal song and dance that you normally find from opposing political interests, right?
Which is why, you don't want opposition.
And I need so I need to say this. I need to say this.
I'm not advocating for one party state.
I mean, it is slowly becoming a one-party state.
I need to say this because I do feel it does sound like I am pro Tinubu.
You are.
No,
You're pro Tinubu, pro Trump. You're pro Trump.
Make Nigeria great again.
I am not.
Who is asking? Why are you worried about that?
Why is it?
No,
It's
I need to.
It's just the comment section.
Why did you have to
comment section go crazy on us. It's like Tinubu's
Why are you trying to explain this? Like, nobody said you, right?
No. I know how it can sound. It can come across. I am pro certain things, and those.
Okay, so you're not pro Tinubu, you're against Tinubu.
No. So if you notice, so what it is that we're cooking soup, right? All the ingredients are there. If you hear me, I'm always still like, this guy's not sold us. He has not really sold us. So the ingredients are not complete, but I can see that the tomatoes is inside, right? The meat is inside, but the shaki and the pomo, they've not entered, So
but the holds and sell that most of the people in this table.
Next topic.
The holds and tell that most of these are valid. They are valid concerns. You can't dismiss.
All right, guys. All right. So we'll go to the last topic. Today we've dealt with a lot. This has been a very interesting drinks and mics, by the way.
We focus more on domestic issues.
Yeah, always great having, and we're still gonna talk domestic now.
Can we talk Trump?
I want us to talk about. Let's leave America with their problems. I want us to talk about consumer credit.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is a perfect segue to some of my buys.
Okay.
We've seen just last week. I don't know if you guys are aware. There was a launch of a credit guarantee company by the Tinubu administration, which I thought was interesting. So, what we've seen is the Credit Corp, which is the organization that's meant to give out credit.
Okay.
You also have student loans
build credit
as well. Yeah. Then you now also have the renewed Hope housing program that also
that has been
around.
That has been decent. That has been decent.
Yeah. Which is also some of those policies that I
can you talk about that? Is it affordable housing?
Yeah, affordable housing as well. Mortgages built inside as well.
Okay.
Then you now also have the collateral registry as well.
Okay.
That is up. So my point is, consumer credit is something I'm very passionate about. I think I've mentioned it here a few times, and I don't know if you agree with me, Samson, that you do need to have as part of an economy that would have delivered sort of growth spurt that we're looking for, especially now that we've seen all the reforms, subsidies taken out, we're purely, market economy. You do need consumer credit. So, do you think that we're heading somewhere with all these agencies being set up and all these companies being set up?
But I think a good place to sort of start is that let's try and define what credit is, right? Credit is basically the borrowing of future output.
Yeah.
Right? You're borrowing future output, monetizing it today in the hope that you are able to create an output in the future that is greater than what your current output is.
Boom.
Right? That's what credit does to you. So within that context, for credit to work at scale, you need to have a reasonably high level of confidence that your future is going to be better than your past. Otherwise, you get trapped in a credit debt trap.
Of course.
Right? So when you look at credit penetration as a whole in Nigeria, there's only one entity that does all the borrowing in this country, and that's the government, right? So there is capacity for credit.
Not all the borrowing, most of the borrowing. Tunji borrows.
I know, but it's a drop. It's a rounding error when you think about. I mean, I look at banks all the time. So I dimension the loan book, right, and I look at it, and I just like
the banks are not.
Banks are not.
Banks are not. Yeah,
exactly.
You're not going to lose your job by lending to the government.
The pension company. There's a lot of crowd now.
The pension company.
Everybody's just sucking value from everybody up to the political elites, right? So unfortunately, that's the model that we currently run. Asiwaju has always been someone that is very keen about credit. And even when he was governor of Lagos State, he's written a lot about in order for you to be able to basically invest in your capacity, you need to be able to borrow output from the future. I think that is fantastic. I have challenges with uneconomic credit. And what do I mean by that?
I want to know. Yeah, I'm quite curious.
I agree.
So, for example, Godwin Emefiele was very big on credit, right? Especially to the agricultural sector.
And rice and tomato.
And unfortunately,
intervention funds and all that.
most of those credits were bad loans. They never came back. So I have challenge with uneconomical credit that are that creates a bit of distortions in the market that allow you to arbitrage one rate versus the other. Right. So then you just create a weird incentive.
Borrow at 9%, and lend at 31%.
So I think I have challenges with that. So to fix, I mean, I'm rambling a lot, but I'm getting somewhere. To really drive credit penetration in an economy, you kind of need to have an interest rate environment that allows credit to mathematically work, right? When you are borrowing at 40%, right? I always tell the people in my office that when I'm lending you 40%,
how much
balance sheets, I'm no longer a credit investor. I have now own equity.
100%. That is what
happens. So to make credit really work at scale, you need two things. You need interest rates, right?
You want to take the room?
It's drinks and mics. Like, I don't understand.
Finally, he came there.
Hot takes was sorry.
To make credit work at scale, you need interest rates, right? That compensate that at least that is lower than your expectation of your income growth. You get what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah.
Unfortunately, with us, I think we will get there if we continue the macroeconomic reforms. We are not there yet.
Yeah.
I like what Asiwaju is doing with ensuring that we have the credit plumbing to ensure that when we get there, credit takes off.
Credit plumbing? Could you explain that?
So the collateral registry is a plumbing, right?
Okay.
Collateral registry wasn't him though.
Right. Credit Corp, when you speak to Uzoma Credit Corp in terms of what he's trying to build outside of the balance sheet, right? A is trying to create a wholesale lending system, right? Similar to what Fannie Mae and Credit Mark is in the US. And B, he's trying to build a central database of credit. So they're trying to bring together all the little credit infrastructure players and create a central database that allow consumer credit.
So just to plug into what you're saying, I'll let you continue. I was just looking through their website. I see that they've given out over 90,000 beneficiaries accessing consumer credit, 24 plus.
Does it say cost? What price does it give?
It doesn't put the cost. For me, this is not what excites me. Because I'm not excited about that.
The last one is that over 19.5 billion naira total value of credit disbursed.
That's pittance though.
What's the size though? What's the size?
Of individual credit. So the areas they've developed, they've deployed to mobility, digital devices, energy solutions. I'm thinking renewable.
It's still early
home
stages.
improvement.
I actually think that balance sheet side of Credit Corp, that's the least exciting side for me. I have had the benefit of sitting with the CEO to understand what he's trying to build. And I understand.
We should get him on Drinks and Mics though.
Yeah, I understand, right, that for political reasons and to catalyze the credit process, you probably need some sort of balance sheet, right? But consumer-facing B2C balance sheet for Credit Corp is not something that excites me. You need to create a wholesale credit lending business that allow people to then do the credit risk assessment, the traditional banking system, the fintechs, and then you can obviously on a market competitive way
be the
ones they come and get financing. And because you are Credit Corp, hopefully you have a better credit rating. You can raise capital for relatively cheap, and then you can use that to distribute into the economy. If you can build that infrastructure, and then you build internal credit capabilities, so things like structured CDOs that allow you to bring together different credit, tranche them, credit enhance them, and then on-sell it to banks.
Is this what he's trying to
pension
build?
fund. That's what he's
trying to build.
I'm not sure Credit Corp is set up for that.
No, but that's his vision.
That's his vision.
Whether he would achieve it and the political
I'm not sure Credit
constraint.
Corp is even set up for that.
Okay.
I'm not sure Credit Corp is set up for that.
But when you speak to him, right?
That you just explained right now,
But it's not as complicated as it
It's not that
sounds.
complicated.
It's not as complicated.
Yeah,
It's
it's
really not.
complicated.
Yeah.
So if he can help build the infrastructure to ensure that we have a centralized
That's what it is, yeah.
credit database, right? And then you can build the wholesale lending model, right? I think if he achieves both, he would start the process of catalyzing the credit. And he's a catalyst. He just
Because that does help to risk a lot of things.
and it will help it does, right? Because like even the credit guarantee, I think is a fantastic idea, right? Because it depends on how you structure
So talk
these
me through a
things.
credit guarantee. What's a credit guarantee?
So essentially,
guarantee to get credit, or
so it's almost like so to set up a company or a government-owned organization with 100 billion naira or so in share capital, and the idea is when the credit card gives you a loan, say they give you a loan of 1 million naira. The credit guarantee company can guarantee 50% of that loan or 40% of that
so
loan.
they subsidize it. Okay.
Not necessarily subsidized in case of
So
default.
the guarantee is
It's an insurance.
Yeah, like an
It's
insurance.
an
Exactly. So they guarantee that
Okay.
loan that you won't default, and then they get a little bit
And
of
then
fees of
what
that.
did they offer
and
the
then-
insurance to someone else? Do they?
Yeah, so
Or they-
those are
We don't know the
some
model
of the
yet.
layers that
Okay.
needs to
Okay.
still pop up, because at some point they would
That'll
also
be
need to
interesting.
reinsure, and then you have a lot of players come in.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, you also need to have the likes of the Fannie Mae's and
Which is what?
here that can
Yeah.
also now come and take off some of those loans off the balance sheet of Credit Corp.
Yeah.
So that I expect. So imagine a Credit Corp or an other loan providers write loans of 500 billion or 1 trillion, and these are loans that are probably going to last say 3-4 years. They don't need to keep those sort of loans
You
on
can
the balance
securitize
sheet,
it
so you
and
can
get that.
securitize those loans, sell it to a company that can buy that loans. off you,
Of course, I
and then
understand.
sell it to pension funds who
Yeah,
are ready
who
to
can
hold
then-
it
yeah,
on for
yeah.
another year. So
Yeah,
that's why I said this
yeah,
is almost
So
like
who does that? The guarantee or the
not
credit
yet.
corp?
We haven't started.
It-
doing
that-
it yet.
so
all the guarantor does is guarantee the loan,
50%
and then the
of that.
credit card just writes credit for now.
Yeah.
And then you now have the collateral registry, which now just that just is basically just a registry.
Yeah.
So we also don't even have credit rating agencies that can rate individual borrowers. So the credit agency we have today focuses on rating
We
companies.
do, but it's just not scaling. It's not that
scaling.
scalable.
Yeah. I'm not
So
even
we
sure
don't have a
any.
credit. We don't have a FICO score, for example.
Exactly, that's my point. Yeah, so you can't get
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
you can't. And then you also
yeah.
don't have insurance companies that are also coming and insuring some of the consumers. But
I
I
think
know
that
what I
when
want to know from your own, from your experience
Yeah.
outside Nigeria as well, and from a lot of stuff that you do. I mean, what does consumer credit mean for the economy in general?
I mean,
from
for
an
me,
investment
man,
perspective. From a
Yeah,
perspective.
so it's interesting you asked that question. I was just thinking about this story someone told me. I don't know how true it is, but I hope it's true. Innocent Smoothies. You know Innocent Smoothies? It's the huge smoothie
Franchise.
franchise.
Yeah, business.
Yeah,
Franchise.
business in England and probably outside England. I'm not sure if they are huge, probably the biggest. The story goes that these two boys or two guys wanted to start a smoothies business, and they couldn't raise any equity from family and friends, and they just looked at themselves and said, "How much do we have?" And they started with the credit cards. How much is your credit limit? £2,000. Yours is £1,000. Let's put it together and let's launch. And it's become huge, big business, big employer as well. That story always, I'm not sure how true it is. I'd like to think it's true because it shows what credits, consumer credits or just credit can do for businesses and then going into the economy. So for me, it's a big deal. I'm a big credit guy, even being a bonds trader, right? So I like that. But if like you talked about, if debts that's taken today based on your future outputs. So if your future outputs is greater than what it is today, you're borrowing against it. It's beautiful. Then it works. So I love it's
my
a big deal.
small worry.
It's a big and my industries I love when I talk about GDP growth, industries, manufacturing. We can't get there without debts.
Without debt, without credit, especially
without credit. Yeah.
So my small issue is that I don't know if it is social or the makeup of Nigerians as a whole. We generally always tend to look for a savior. And when that savior can't produce, we tend to vilify the savior. Credit Core is in no capacity to fix the entire credit problem. It is one piece of the puzzle.
They're just one player in the
just one
entire industry,
it's like 1 of 10 that is supposed to come together. Exactly.
Yeah.
So all those other pieces need to come together for Credit Core to actually excel at what it does. And at that point, Credit Core might not even be the standout player, but it will be the part of the ecosystem that makes it efficient. But again, it goes back to rule of law. A lot of these things are tied to,
being able to recover that credit,
so that my recovery process doesn't take 17 years, to collect 25,000 naira. Yeah. So all those things need to come together.
But I think the ecosystem is getting built. I think the ecosystem is getting built. I think that
because I don't want us to build up Credit Core to the.
No, I'm not building. I'm not building.
No, because that is what. So we're building up to the point where we are setting them up for failure.
No. I think Asiwaju's government is intentional on ensuring that we have a vibrant credit economy, right? And credit is critical in any modern.
Uses to start going
in any modern economy, credit is important. For example, when I'm looking at the US or other foreign markets, one of the analyses that I do is what I call the credit impulse, right? I look at the rate of change of credit stock to know whether an economy is going to go up or down. If you do that analysis in Nigeria, you will lose money. Right? So I think it's very and as an investor, I track the direction of credit to kind of know where I want to invest in.
Yeah, of course.
Right? For example, one of the reasons why I made the argument here, I think it was the last time or the time before that the property bubble in China, the burst of private bubble in China was deliberate, was because I tracked bank credit data and I saw that it's a slowdown in real estate lending that was replaced by an increase in industrial loans. Because of that insight, you are able to know, okay, it is quite clear that a lot of money is going into industrial China, right? We should be able to do that in Nigeria. So that's important. I think interest rates needs to come down. I'll give an example. Like I have a mortgage in the UK, right? Because that's where I used to work. And I think at the time when I took out the mortgage, my interest rate was like 1.94% a year. Wow. Right? So it was a numbers. It was a 35-year mortgage, right?
Wow.
Amortizing mortgage. So I paid principal and interest based on my monthly coupons. Yeah. And when I did the model in order to get the credit agreement sorted, I think I was paying around 1.4 times the value of the assets I was buying over the lifetime of the assets. Right? Because
I'm explaining that I'm still to get that.
Like 30 years. What was it?
40%.
So I'm buying 40. Basically, when I did the modeling, I'm paying. So if I bought the house for the sake of arguments for £1 million,
so it's paying 1.4
at the end
million.
of 35 years, I would have paid 1.4 million.
Okay.
But think about it. Within 35 years, the value of the house is probably growing by like 5% a year. 5% a year compounded over 35 years.
It's incredible.
It's a huge number. So you can see how much wealth that can create. Right? So which is why, but if you that's why I'm like,
you can't run that model in Nigeria.
I always ask people that have mortgage business in Nigeria is that how do you make the model work?
Yeah.
Because once you add duration to your lending, it's very, very complicated.
Yeah, I'm telling you, right? At 25%.
So if you're compounding at 25%, if I take a 30-year loan, let me just do the maths very quickly.
So I mean, that's the argument that interest rates needs to be low, right? It's and then also another argument for me,
unlock a lot of all these things.
Yeah, following that as well is the DMO of the cost of borrowing on the government side also needs to be lower.
But I thought you were interest rate high.
No, when was I interested? No, this is not silly. That's a silly. No, okay.
When it comes to returns, I don't
you were interested.
It wasn't interest rate high.
But when it comes
There's honor of the people and there's honor of his money. So I always decide what hat should I wear today? I'm out of the people. I'm with the people right now. So
it's Otunba with the
Okay, can I just say something?
It's Otunba with the money.
Can I? This is very simplified because I didn't amortize it.
Yeah.
But assuming I'm on an interest-only mortgage in Nigeria at 20%,
and that's
a 20-year mortgage,
20% is cheap. You will get
20-year
20%.
mortgage. At the end of the mortgage,
30%.
I would need to pay to the bank 38 times the value of what I bought.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
It doesn't
just
make sense.
compounds. It's incredible.
Doesn't make sense.
So
doesn't make sense.
There's no asset that you will buy.
Yeah.
That
is
will
likely
give you
to
that
go
sort
out
of return.
But I guess that's why
38%,
mortgage companies are not
38
trying to
times.
give mortgages for 35%.
Yeah, so
And
what
your
happens is that the trick is that people get
loan to-
mortgages just so that you can at least own their property and then give yourself 3, 4, 5 years.
That's
I
not
think
a mortgage.
you can't. I think it's not a mortgage.
I don't call
Yeah,
that
yeah,
a mortgage.
Yeah,
That's a mortgage. That's a mortgage.
We're also, I mean, we're going to real estate now, where rental yield here is extremely low. Right, so even if you're trying to do some sort of,
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
The
yeah.
market doesn't
Can't do
do
it.
it.
Forget rental. We're talking about even property,
Owning a home to live.
property value vis-a-vis what you bought, vis-a-vis the credit that you bought it with.
Because if I have a mortgage in
What
Nigeria,
did I do? I just said what.
It wasn't
I
really.
think just remember
The
the
guys
time.
are already telling me that
Time.
there's time.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're almost hitting 2 hours already. Apologies.
Oh, wow.
Apologies, Sam.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
But I want us to close.
Sorry.
I want us to close now.
Okay.
And I want us to close with I mean, use this time to say whatever it is you want to say. So it's June. We're almost hitting half year.
My birthday month,
it's not
by the
half
way.
year yet. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Oh, wow.
So we're drinking.
I turned 21.
You turned
so when you're over 40, you start to lie.
Just leave me there. You
That's
can't
like, that's why I was very upset.
Forever young.
Where some people, without my consent, put out my age, my birthday in the
sorry.
papers, and it was
I don't know why.
Right there.
people got queries for that, but that's what I'm doing. Anyways, guys, it's the beginning of the month. I just wanted to know what's on your radar.
Okay.
Yeah, for Drinks and Mics, viewers. They want to know what you guys are thinking of, what's on your radar. It could be stocks, it could be crypto, it could be business, could be anything really.
Yeah.
Right? But it has economic connotations. So of course I'm going to start on my right with Tunji. Just
So-
one thing. Quickly, no time. What's on your radar?
So I've done a lot of what in my mind I call soft investment. So things like equities, treasury bills, things like that, crypto. I've done quite a bit of that. My mind is now beginning to active, and also, I also in my mind, how I invest, I also think, the business I'm building right now is also part of my investment portfolio. But I've started to think about, hard investments.
What do you mean?
So what my people call karakata.
No? What's that?
Sorry. So the hard
and mortar.
retail, brick and mortar,
Real economy.
real economy.
Okay.
I don't have any data about it.
Okay.
I don't have any insights
What kind of real
yet.
stuff are you doing?
So that's my point.
Okay.
I'm now beginning to that.
Oh, you're looking at
That's
real
my
stuff.
that's where
yeah.
my focus is now turning
Okay.
to.
No.
I want to be able to get into the real economy and basically, those I sell 3, I make 7 naira. Those kind of things. That's where my focus is now beginning to shift. I've seen a bit of returns on the crypto space.
Yeah.
I've seen a bit of
Sorry
returns
to
on the
cut you off.
equity market
Is
space.
it an age thing? So when you sit with the old boys who are traders and stock and bond trade investors, when I sit with them, the tutorial is they're saying the same thing. I'm doing real economy stuff, and I've always wondered: is it an age thing? Do you get tired
so
of the
just
markets?
getting older, by the way.
Yeah, and it's like all the old boys that I look up to.
5
When I
years ago,
talk to
Tunji
them,
was
they're
all
like, I'm doing
about,
real economy stuff. I'm doing real
software,
economy. I'm like,
fintech,
this real economy stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry to is it an
how
age
they
thing?
insult you that you're
Is it an
old.
age thing? Yeah. No, but it's true when I sit with the old boys. That's all they're saying. Real
What's on
economy.
your own radar?
So I'm a top-down guy, right? So it generally means I try to get a view of the world. What would the world look like in 18 to 24 months? But you were talking about June, which sort of still follows my 18 to 24 month approach. I think that we're going into a higher US yield environment. especially on the long end. We've seen 20, 30-year US Treasuries go to cross 5%. Almost surprised if we see 6, 7% in this period I mentioned. So what I've been asking myself for the past few months is, what makes money when US yields go up and what loses money when US yield go down? I've been short treasuries for a while. I think I mentioned that. That's been good. I'm still long gold, although I think gold is getting expensive. When you look at, so I study gold aggressively, man. So, gold.
No, man.
Yeah, gold, uses of gold, treasury, technology, jewelry, technology, central banks, and investments, right? So it's gotten a little bit wobbly with a few of those demands on the demand side, where jewelry, obviously, price of gold has gotten expensive. So jewelry, quarter on quarter, will be lower. Jewelry purchases will be lower. Central bank is slightly lower as well, quarter on quarter and year on year as well, which is worrying to my gold view, because my gold view was always strongly gold is structural shifts away from US dollar, right? So the reduction in central bank, I think from 360 tons in Q4 to 259 tons in Q1.
Nigerian central bank?
No, this is global central banks. Yes, this is gold, yeah. It's a little bit shaky. Obviously, the big push on gold last quarter and probably this quarter is ETFs. So investment holdings of gold have more than doubled. But still, regardless, I still think gold is a structural play. I'm not saying I'll reduce gold, but I'm still quite bullish on gold. But on the precious metal as a whole, I'm a buyer of silver. I think silver. I haven't finished. I like oil. So anything on the oil, I think oil's cheap. Yeah, oil's really, really cheap technically. I'm slowly buying oil ETFs. Yeah, so I'm buying the United States Brent ETF. Slowly. Bitcoin.
See why I pressed my horn?
Sorry, man.
When Arnold gets going.
Sorry, man. I've always liked Bitcoin. I'm not just aggressive, right?
Now you're
so I think that, no, let me tell you. I think Bitcoin, I think crypto, let me land. I think crypto is becoming slowly and steadily, but increasingly important in our environment. So I think you talked about a soup, right? So in your investment soup, you need a salt. Yeah. So I'll sprinkle some Bitcoin in that. So Bitcoin is interesting. So going in, I like Nigerian Euro bonds. Even though we're going into high yield US treasuries.
You've gone 3. You'll pay a price.
Okay, sorry.
I'm trying to see how my Barrick gold is doing. I invested in Barrick gold some years back. I should check that.
So gold producers
are
straight.
Okay,
we're going.
I agree. Just a quick one on gold, right?
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of your thesis around why you own gold.
Yeah.
I think about gold as alternative money.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And so I always ask myself, what can that alternative money buy? Right? And to get a sense of what is the overvaluation and what the undervaluation. And right now, an ounce of gold can give you the most utility of any product you think of in the most recent history.
But it's getting more expensive to buy that.
It's getting more expensive to buy that.
Yeah. Gold versus oil, gold versus silver, 100%.
So when I look at gold relative to other commodities,
it's expensive.
Gold is very expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah,
doesn't mean it doesn't get more expensive. So in my head, I'm like, if I'm de-dollarizing, which I think is a theme, and I agree with Arnold that de-dollarization will continue. If I'm de-dollarizing, I need to then be thinking about, on my balance sheet, the asset that I'm buying, what can it buy me in terms of real economic output? And gold is getting to a point where it's buying less and less because the price is getting higher and higher in terms of volume for a volume comparison. So I think commodities are starting to look interesting.
Attractive,
starting to look interesting. Yeah. Oil is starting to look interesting. Yeah. So those are the things that I'm spending a little bit of time on. Obviously, we are getting to the expiration of the 90-day pause on the tariff. And obviously, Trump rhetoric has been stepping up.
Wow, almost 90
Yeah, by end of I think it's July.
Beginning of July. Second of July.
So the rhetorics obviously have been stepping up, especially between the Chinese. So I'm monitoring that quite closely and see what happens. There's obviously the big beautiful bill.
That on your radar as well.
That's worrying on the bond side.
I have that on my radar because the interplay that I'm playing in my head, right? Because I always have this view that it's so difficult to go into a recession when you are overspending. And the only thing that stops overspending in the US is the bond market discipline in the US, right? And there might be a gap between. So the question now, I think the US slows down, may go into a recession. That recession decision is a function of how quickly can it be beautiful build, pick up the slack that comes from the slowdown. So
big beautiful.
So a lot of my thinking is really around how to think about US growth trajectory. Because like my base case is that I want US to deflate, but not explode downwards, right? I think if we have a deflation of the US,
which is what's happening though, which is what is so if you really look at it, it's deflating.
Yeah, but the problem is that they can make mistakes and they can make errors that can push things down. Yeah, so obviously NFP on Friday, I'm going to pay very close attention to that, and that's what I'm spending time on locally. Obviously, I love the equity market. We are starting to make preparations for Q1 numbers, which is going to be Q2 numbers, which is going to be out in July, August. So most of my time I'm spending visiting companies to sort of understand how business have been, the operational performance of the business, so that I can start to model
you visit all your...
Of course. I visit most of my
portfolio companies.
Yeah,
Do that.
Yeah,
all right, guys. So
you have to know what you're buying.
I should say my...
You want to buy something, one second, the next thing is very different.
They don't disclose, because obviously the disclose period, so they don't tell you how
they're not going to tell you that.
But you can read body language. You can read body language.
All right, so do I need to...
Yes. You need to do your June. And give me your time so I can...
I don't have the app.
All right, so okay, so for me, on my watch list is two things, right? I mean, one is banks. Banks on my watch list because I think forbearance is knocking on the door
June 30th.
next couple of weeks.
June 30th.
And so for those who don't know what forbearance means, essentially a lot of the leeway that banks have had around making provisions for bad loans would expire. And so, like they say, when the tide is...
You see who's swimming naked.
We see who's swimming naked.
So what do you think, or which bank do you think is going to be? Are you worried about?
I mean, I don't... To be honest, I don't know. A lot of banks...
Honestly, this is why drinks and bikes is a bad thing.
Name names.
I swear to God, I was about to start naming names.
Because you're so calm. You think you're in your living room, right?
I know, all of a sudden you get
it just caught myself.
We don't want... I mean, like, look. For educational purposes, forbearance doesn't mean it'll run on any bad. Nothing like that. It's just about investment and understanding which banks. So understanding which banks are going to pay dividends and which banks are going to be hit from a profitability standpoint.
Okay, which banks do you think are solid?
But of course, I mean, you have Samson's social media. You can follow him. If you're a subscriber to my...
I don't talk about markets on social media.
Oh, okay. If you're a subscriber to my personal blog, not Nairametrics, my own personal blog, you can probably check some of my views. And I'm sure if you also read Arnold's newsletter, you would get some. Tunji
I don't say anything
Tunji cannot say nothing. Or else he's in trouble. Yeah, so that's what
regulator now.
So the second thing... The second thing on my radar though is also
2 hours.
Post 2 hours already. Post Nigeria. So I beg your pardon. Outside Nigeria, I see that we're getting a lot of Nigerian companies now turning into multinationals and going across Africa. So it's interesting to see how that is playing.
Moneypoint just got a license.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see. Yeah, because if you're seeing UBA here, First Bank here, GT, Dangote, Moneypoint, InterSwitch, our bar trying to get into Ghana. I guess the next question is
into Ghana?
Yeah, I guess the next question is who's joining? So right. So what does this mean for? What does this mean for the Nigerian ecosystem?
Are you serious,
guys?
I actually had breakfast with someone who was asking about you.
So these guys are discussing deals. Deals on my radar. On my radar.
Ignore the camera. Ignore the camera. There is a tier 2 pension fund in Ghana that I think I can turn around.
Commission.
I really can't turn
commission.
around.
Okay, we can have a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
So interesting. But that's the beauty of Drinks and Mics, and we bring opportunities to you. So that's on my radar. Interesting to see how a lot of Nigerian companies are expanding. FCFTA will come whether I like it or not. So how are ancillary Nigerian businesses jumping on the bandwagon? If a Florida Wave is going outside Nigeria or
Florida Wave has gone out.
They've been in Ghana for a bit as well. Florida Wave, right?
So who are the Nigerian businesses that are jumping on that bandwagon?
Yeah.
Everybody is
like outside. So that's been on my radar. That's something I'm researching.
Yeah,
trying to find out how interesting that is. Guys, this has been I don't know.
Do you know what's
Probably
been
one of the
interesting
longest
for me,
episodes of
though?
Drinks and
Like,
Mics.
what's been interesting
I
is-
don't want us to end.
I don't definitely
want us
don't.
to
I don't
end.
want to go.
No,
I am
Can I
going
say
to
something?
ring the
Can I
bell
say
pretty
something?
soon.
I've noticed something really interesting lately. There's this huge positive wave of the perception of Nigerian investment environment from the outside.
Yeah.
This came even before Moody's upgraded us over the weekend. FT did a wonderful piece on us. Not sure if you saw that. It started off a bit funny and then it was really good. I had so many people.
This sounds like your.
No.
I'm talking about Nigerian business going out. I'm talking about there's going to be an interesting wave of guys coming in.
Yeah.
Because the whole worry was there was.
Sam, you're not like you're not buying this.
No,
I'm
but
just- I'm
like,
just
I have,
conversations.
since I started being a guest on this show, I have been quite consistent with my views around Nigeria.
You have
so, and Arnold has been probably a bit on the edge.
Yeah.
So now he's just
So
changing.
I'm actually quite surprised.
Arnold has done an about turn.
Yeah, so I'm actually
I haven't
quite.
done an about turn.
I'm actually quite. I'm
holding
actually
by.
quite. I'm actually quite. But it is true
But it's true,
about
there's a
foreign
wave.
participation.
Yeah,
And
there's a
you
wave
can
coming
see,
that's-
I
and
do a
it's
lot of
different.
active trading in the market, right? So there's a way I get a sense of how strong a stock is, depending on how much assets I can buy and sell quickly.
Liquidity, yeah.
And the strength of buys on certain stocks like GT, Nestle, and those are stocks that foreign investors tend to like. You can just tell once you are in the process. Like if I say I want to sell 5 million GT and the broker is like done, you can just tell
There's something
that
in there.
there's
Yeah,
somebody else
there's
going to buy that.
Yeah. So I there's that increase.
5 million GT. Did you hear that?
No. As I said it, I was looking this way, but
million
my mind
units
was
of
doing
GT.
calculation
Wow.
like 5 million pounds.
No, but I think this is it's almost like a secondish wave. I think that's going to come in, and I'm looking.
But
at it
we didn't
through-
get that 95% we had 95% sell off of foreign investors.
Yeah, but
I mean, those are
it's
month-on-month data, so you have to be careful. The key data for me.
that one wasn't that based off a huge trade in the
Wapco.
yeah, that was compared to the Wapco trade now, so it wasn't a distorted
So there was a
data.
reordering, the restructuring of the holdings by Okomu.
yeah. So it was
offshore to
So that
offshore.
affected that.
That affected it. Yeah, it affected it.
Wapco.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Drinks and Mics brought to you by Nairametrics. We've done 2 hours plus. I know you probably want more, but I mean, these are very
So
busy
the-
men.
so-
They have to go.
So the problem
Let's go for
is,
By the way, Arnold, for example, after Drinks and Mics, he usually has Chinese dinner. I don't know where he has it. He's probably going
Hey,
so he
Right,
has a
right,
chef
routine.
at home.
No, but not drinks and Mike's
He
nights.
goes
I order
for-
Chinese.
Yeah, he goes for his
Yeah.
Chinese. That's
Sweet and
his,
sour
somewhere he
chicken.
goes for his Chinese. Sam tends to always have
It's my
meetings.
routine. We're just
Meetings
giving up my
till late in the
routine.
night.
That's my cheat
Tunji,
day.
I don't know. Tunji goes home to his family.
I'm boring.
and all that.
Like that.
Something else that's on my watch list though is sports. So if you catch me in Ikoyi Club, I'm ping pong.
What's the sport?
I can always kill any of these guys in ping pong.
Oh, you play ping
I'm
pong?
trying to
You play
improve my
ping
ping
pong?
pong levels. Yeah, I'm trying to improve my. Yeah, I have a
let's
coach
play.
right now who's trying to like.
You have a coach.
Yeah, who's
Oh,
trying to
that's
turn me to a
serious.
star. Yeah,
I never
You have
thought
a
there was
table tennis coach.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I do.
Let me shake your hand.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, I want to be
Gotta give him one champion, man.
the next Atonda.
Who has a table tennis
I just wait. Like I went
table
there.
tennis
So
coach?
here's the story. I went there and I thought I was a pro and I got in there and
These are some Chinese guys, but
then I was giving like 11-1. Like 11-1. I'm like, what? And the guy that was beating me was his stomach was like this. Like, that's when I realized that
Skills.
this is not about how you look.
it's not
man.
about skills.
It's about skills.
Skills
Like this.
Yeah, skills to make moves.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Drinks and Mics brought to you by
I
Nairametrics.
loved it. I loved it.
Thank you so much for being a part of
Please,
it.
don't
We have
forget
winners, though. Remember.
winners in the comment section. Check
And
it out.
all
Check
the
it out.
5 guys under my Otunba Arnold winners.
And by the way,
find a way to get the books to you.
Drinks and Mike's live session is gonna come. It's
course.
gonna be the last episode for the season. We're not gonna tell you guys when, so that I don't know when the season is gonna end because we will take a break.
Yeah.
At some point here, so that we can retool. But that last episode is gonna be a live session. So if you want to be a part of it, of that live session, what you simply need to do is send an email write to info@nairametrics.com.
Boom.
And tell us you want to be a part of a live session.
So we can have your details.
Have
and
your
we'll-
details.
We're gonna ask you, your table tennis coach, how many sessions do you wait? This is
Okay,
bothering me. I was trying to like going to do this and you do this. What else is there?
As we drink some
Wait. Bye. I was thinking about it.
Bye.